I am being watched. Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Person of Interest, Season 3, Episode 11. It's called Lethe. So, spoilers for the episode, as always. Super fascinated to see what we're going to do with this episode after those last 3 episodes. I think I said last time I expect it to cool down a little bit, and it does to an extent, although by the end of the episode, it kind of feels like we're already back up to DEFCON 1 or whatever. But, we have a number. Reese isn't around. Part of the story here is that he's dipped out, and that's kind of a subplot. But I was like, maybe we'll get like a regular episode. It just happens to be Shaw that's in the sort of the main operative role for the team, right? She's the one doing everything. But as it went on, it then started to drop some bombshells. That honestly, this episode has one of the best mic drops of the show, which is saying something at this point. It really does a lot to further enhance some of the lore behind the machine, behind Control, who of course we know who that is by the end of the episode, and also just who Finch is and his past, which is kind of the first thing that I want to talk about here. When this episode starts get going, and we have the investigation being this guy in the hospital who's called Arthur Claypool, that's his name, played by Saul Rubinek, who I mainly know as Daphne's almost husband from Frasier. That's what I know him from. But he is in the hospital and he's got a brain tumor and his memory is going in and out, right? And he gets confused. He doesn't, he thinks he's in 2005. He doesn't recognize his wife, although that ends up in a nice little twist for later. But like, you get a sense of who this character is, and that maybe the reason why someone's interested in him and the reason why that he has like Secret Service dudes hanging around him is because he was important. Like, whatever job he had was a big deal, and the idea that he's just blurting out things that he knows might be something top secret, might be something that the government or whoever don't want anyone to know. So that's interesting. But as this is progressing along, there's this running thing throughout where Shaw keeps suggesting that Finch join him on site to do something, right? To pretend to be the administrator at the hospital or whatever it is. And Finch keeps ducking out of it. He clearly doesn't want to. He doesn't want to even leave the office at first, and he keeps avoiding it as much as he can. In fact, at the start of this episode, I should mention that he's actually not even picking up the phone for the machine. He claims there's no number, but he's just avoiding it. He's like lashing out or something, and Root kind of gives him shit for it and says, look, you can't take it out on her. You have to do the right thing here. You have to, and it turns out that Root somehow has the numbers, or has the message that leads to the numbers on the spines of the books, and he rightly questions, how did you get that information? Like, how are you communicating with the machine? And she doesn't answer. She just says, hey, you have to do this, like, this is important, you get on with it. And that's interesting. It especially might be very important given that Reese and Fusco are like states away. Maybe somehow whoever the machine's communicating with Root here is how she's going to end up helping, because they need some kind of cavalry based on the ending of this episode. This ends on a cliffhanger. This is not like any illusions that we're doing just case of the week stories anymore. It feels like it's been like half a dozen episodes at this point since we've really had one of those. But so throughout the episode, he keeps saying, no, I'm not getting involved. He keeps coming up with excuses. It's better that I stay out here. Even once he eventually gets into the car and he's outside the hospital, he keeps saying no. And then, of course, they have to move the patient. They have to move Arthur. He is in danger. The Secret Service guys have all been taken out. I'll talk more about some of this stuff when I talk about Shaw, but they're trying to convince him to leave. The wife isn't successful. She's not getting him to move. And then all of a sudden you hear Finch's voice saying, Arthur, we have to go now. We have to go somewhere. And Arthur says, Harold? And Shaw turns and looks at Finch like, what the hell? And it's very clear that these two know each other. And what I loved about this reveal is that up until this point in the episode, I thought the episode had very elegantly shown me why he didn't want to get involved in this case. And that was that this guy has got the same symptoms that his own father did, and that's in the flashbacks. I'll talk about them in a bit. But up until this point in the episode, I thought, oh, this is an emotional thing. This is him not wanting to deal with this because it's too close to his own personal history. It's going to open too many wounds, whatever it may be. And then we have this scene where it's no, it actually turns out to be exactly the same thing that the Secret Service were there to like worry about. It's that he knows that if he sees him, if Arthur sees Harold, then he might start revealing things about Finch's past, because Finch is so secretive, right? Just the way that the Secret Service and the government are secretive about a bunch of things that Arthur might know. So I thought that was a really cool little reveal. It really felt like it all of a sudden opened up, and it made the episode go from just being like a solid fun episode and suddenly felt important. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was important in other ways. The flashbacks felt important, the Reese stuff feels important, but the main plot felt like it was just a simple enough episode. And then this moment hit, and it was like, oh shit, we're off into the stratosphere. All of a sudden, it feels like a big deal. This is someone who knows Arthur from his past. They went to MIT together. He just immediately knows who he is and starts trying to like catch up and whatever. Like, all of it was super invigorating and really exciting. And then it obviously leads to a bunch of other like mythology stuff later in the episode. But from a Finch character perspective, this was a fascinating like pull. And we've had hints of some stuff about Finch's past, and this episode lays it on thick, because not only do we get this reveal of like some of his early adulthood, I suppose, from this guy, but we also get the flashbacks where we see Finch as a kid with his father, and his father is showing symptoms early on. And like, I think 1969 is the first flashback. He's already starting to like forget where he put things, and then it kind of progresses from there. But it also shows that Finch was very capable with machines. He took apart something in the engine of the car and showed what the fault was. And it starts off a running little line between him and his dad where he says, hey, if they wanted people to stay out of it, they'd build it better. And that's kind of like a thing that he repeats to his father later on. But we see him, like the first thing that he builds, or the first thing we see him build at the very least, is a device that's designed to help with memories, right? And he's made it for his father. It does Morse code with a little light bulb. And keep in mind, this is like 1971, so we're in pretty ancient terms of technology here, but quite smart for a kid to put this thing together, where it basically just sort of like repeats back Morse code messages. And he's like, hey, it's a machine that remembers things. And immediately, as soon as he said that, as soon as young Finch said that, I immediately started thinking about how at the end of season 2, we found out that the machine was being forced to purge its memories every day. That Finch's goals started with, I want to build a machine that can remember things. And he even says that phrase, it's almost a little too on the nose even, in this flashback with his dad. But I kind of liked it sparking the thought in my mind, because it got me thinking about how, so much of what he was doing with the machine before, he was scared to let the machine grow and become something, so he made it purge itself every day, and the machine had to go out of its way to find other ways to remember things. And isn't that, like, sadly ironic, given what his father went through? Like, his father started to forget things, and that's what he was forcing the machine to do. Like, the level of guilt that if he like is realizing that he was forcing the machine to live like his dad, who clearly didn't like, forgetting things. He felt ashamed. He felt like he was holding his son back and all these other things. The idea that Finch was forcing that upon someone, it really, like, honestly, on a rewatch, that scene where we find out that Finch is doing that to the machine, like, the look on his face and the guilt he feels in that moment is probably amplified. Now you know this, and now you know what his father was going through. And how somewhere along the ways he flipped kind of his mantra of what the machine was for, because the one thing he didn't let it do was remember things. That's the one thing he stopped it from, even though he achieved everything else that he set out to do with it by the time he got to that part in life. So I thought that was fascinating. It's also really interesting seeing that he had this kind of attitude of like, it doesn't matter if I don't go somewhere, I'll just bring the information to me. And he does that over the phone with this sort of like little hack to like phone France. He then sort of says it to his dad after his dad sort of dropped off home with the police officer. And the cops just said to him, hey, you're going to have to maybe put him in a home, because like you can't monitor him 24/7. So maybe it's time to like put him somewhere that can look after him. And the dad feels guilty that he's holding his son back. And he's like, hey, I don't have to go off to college. They're building a network that connects all the universities. I'll just find a way to bring all the information to me, which, kind of lines up with him being a hacker and like using the internet and all that. And this is effectively the early version of the internet he's talking about. Like, I don't know the ins and outs of it too well, but I do know that the first version of the internet back in the 70s or whatever was just all the universities and colleges were all connected, and that was it. Obviously, it progressed, over the next 20 years until it kind of started to become what we all think of the internet as. But yeah, him being at the forefront of that's like an interesting sort of detail to line up with history. But I thought all of this was fascinating about how he treated the machine and what he specifically did to the machine, which was rob it of its ability to remember things. And that seems especially cruel given what he knows that his dad went through that. I think that's really interesting. It feels like there's more to explore here. And I suspect there's going to be more flashbacks in a future episode with the end of his relationship with his father. Possibly more than one, but certainly the end of the relationship I would expect to see at some point. So that was wonderful. Loved all that. Obviously, once it's revealed that he knows Arthur in the present day stuff, I love Shaw reacting to that. I love Shaw reacting to them singing the song from MIT together. All that was entertaining. But then, of course, he gets to the juicy stuff, right? He starts talking about, like, what do they want to know? I should also mention that Vigilance showed up to try and get him. Like, they were actually the ones sending people after him at first. But then, of course, later it turns out that the wife wasn't really the wife, and that's why he can't remember her. It's because she's actually there. She's Control. Turns out, because Hirsch shows up. Hirsch is working for her. This was the woman in the car at the end of season 2. So, yeah, this was the big reveal at the end. But before we actually get to that reveal, they're asking Arthur what's going on. And the Project Samaritan came up, right? He blurted that out at one point earlier in the episode. So they start asking him about that. And he basically starts describing the machine. He's like, oh, it's a system to like monitor and understand what it's monitoring and, give us like a chance to, act before things happen. And again, the reactions from Finch, of course, but also Shaw, like Shaw looking at him and then her being like, is he talking what I think he's talking about? And this realization that there was a second machine of some kind. And kind of honestly, by the sounds of it, there was several attempts at a machine, right? When Arthur says that his project was shut down when he was very, very close to finishing it, he gives a date. It's like February 25th, 2005. And there's a look in Harl's face when he says that. And now, I'm sure this is actually just in the previous episode when this happened, but I assume that's when at least the government found out about the machine working, if not when it first turned on. But either way, that date is important and it means something to Finch. And Arthur kind of thinks that too. Arthur's theory, and he's right, is that all of these projects were shut down, and he names like another 4 or 5 of different names. So there's clearly different people around the country who are trying to design the machine in some form or another. And which makes sense. Like, so much technology isn't the only, like usually there's a winner, right? So think of Blu-ray and HD DVD or something like that, right? Where there's 2 competing types of the same thing, and one wins out. So it's not that surprising that there was several attempts to do something similar. So this is all kind of making sense. We're kind of understanding it, especially since I'm like, okay, it's not a functioning second machine, but it's one that got close, which begs the question, why do Vigilance want it? And then obviously once we get the reveal that Control's here, why does she want it? Presumably to have their own machine that they can control, because the current one is rogue. In fact, Control asks Finch, that's a big deal here. Control's met Harold now. She knows who he is to some extent, that he's the one in charge. Obviously, he doesn't give his second name. He's not a fool, but they're in a predicament here. But clearly, she wants to know where the machine is, but the goal initially was to find out where this Project Samaritan is. So I presume because it was the one that, at least from the way Arthur describes it, it sounds like the one that was the closest to finishing that was shut down. But it's not actually destroyed. Or at the very least, he had backups of a lot of his work. And it seems like they want to build their own machine, so they've got their own. And that's kind of a big deal. Like, imagine if there's an evil machine, or not that the machine itself is evil, but there's a machine being controlled by evil people who do have complete control, because the safeguards that Finch put into the main machine isn't there. Like that, I don't know if we're going to go down that route, potentially. No pun intended. Yeah, because route. But I could see that being a big plot. Like, we've got, about 2 seasons left, full seasons, because I know the last season's only about 13 episodes. We've got about 2 full seasons worth of episodes left. That sounds like a big plot we could do. I don't know if that's where we're going. I'm not saying I definitely, like, I won't be disappointed if that's not where we're going, because I kind of trust them at this point to know what they're doing and where they're going and whatever. But still, it's a fascinating thing that gets your brain going, and you can't help but notice that at the ending of the episode, it goes to the machine view, like it's going through all the database or the network, and it kind of finds Project Samaritan, and it changes from like defunct or deactivated to unknown, and it starts like a loading bar. And I wonder if the machine itself, maybe because it can't help the characters in the scene, like the next best thing the machine can do right now is to actually reach out and find this other prototype machine, and maybe, I don't know, I don't know, like you do something with it to protect it or something. I don't know, like, but it felt like the machine was looking for it itself once this information was kind of out in the open at the end, or at least it was shown that way to the audience, because it makes for a good cliffhanger at the very least. So all that stuff was fascinating, really interesting. You know, it feels dangerous here. You know, Shaw, of course, tries her best to fight off all the guys that come in, but outnumbered. They're all operatives. Hirsch is there. So they're kind of in a hard place right now. And of course, Finch is, you know, like kind of like he does such a good job of shielding himself. In fact, one of the things that kind of gets taken away, I suppose, because of the twist that it's not really the wife. But I was thinking in the moment when they first get into this like hotel room or whatever it is that they're hiding, there's a little moment where Finch tries to talk to Arthur and says, "Hey, you work for the NSA, right? Like, can we talk about that?" And Arthur turns and says, "Not in front of her." And it's like a sad moment because you still think she's the wife at this point, and she gets kind of upset and walks away. Like this is a recurring thing that breaks her heart. She even said it to Shaw earlier in the episode that he never spoke to her about his work. Like, she was like shielded from it, and he was very secretive. So the fact that it turns out to not really be the wife does maybe take away from this a little bit, but I still think it still applies in the sense that that's the way Finch was with people he cared about, you know? Like, that's the way Finch has been with everyone, really. And this idea of how upsetting it is to her, it does make you think about Finch's own decisions about withholding from people and the way he acts, you know? So I thought that was an interesting little thing for Finch to see, even though it does turn out to not really be the wife, so therefore the emotion from her is fake. But still, it got me thinking about that, just because it does tie in so well with you know, who Finch is and what he does with his secrets. I really liked all that. I mean, even just like throughout the episode, this idea of a character who has secrets and is important, but has been very cut off from everyone, and no one knows why he's important. Again, it all sounds like Finch to an extent, and that's all fascinating to look at. Just to look at some things from Shaw, I do love to just carry on a little thread from last episode that we get her pretending to be a doctor in a hospital right after we found out that she was a doctor before she went into the current line of work. And there's a couple of little callbacks to her being insensitive. There's a moment where, you know, when you still think it's the wife and she's breaking down because, oh, you know, Arthur never talks to me, and Shaw just blurts out, "Talk's overrated." And then she's like, "What?" It's like, "Oh, I mean, that sounds horrible. That sounds terrible. Tell me more." Yeah, like I think those little moments for Shaw were great. Her like detecting that Arthur was basically being interrogated when they were putting him in the big scanner, the MRI or whatever. The comedy of her being interrogated by the Secret Service dude who's eating his Chinese food. Like, just those little moments had a little bit of levity, a little bit of humor. Although the biggest bit of humor for me in this episode actually came from the moment where it revealed Fusco was watching Reese. That moment, for whatever reason, when Reese just kicked off the cap with his hand and pulled the newspaper down, and we see it's Fusco's tailed him to Iowa. I think it was Iowa or Idaho. I don't know. One of the states began with I. Doesn't, whatever. They may as well be the same. And I'm sure people from either of those states are infuriated that I said that, but they're basically the same place to me. So yeah, like, Reese has went to the bar that his dad used to visit when he was alive, and he's just drinking. And there's a moment early on where he sees like a fight breaking out, like one guy's getting kind of picked on outside, and Reese stands up as if he might intervene, but then he just grabs his drink and goes and sits down elsewhere. He's not doing that. So, you know, he's in a dark place. So I do love that Fusco's the one here to come and get him. I think that is perfect, because everything I said last episode about the contrast between them, the idea that Reese has went to his dark place again, but Fusco has came out the other side, where Carter did so much for him. And I said last time that obviously so did Reese. And I love that Fusco brings that up. Fusco just kind of confronts him when he's drinking. Reese says, I said you could stay if you drink, but you're drinking soda. And he's like, yeah, because I'm 2 years sober. And Reese just goes, why? It's like, because one day some guy came into the back of the car, threatened me into like being better, and one of the things that I gave up because I was doing a lot of stupid things, one of them was drinking. So that's one of the signs that my life, I've put myself together, that I'm better, that I've solved the problems that I had. One of them presumably being that he was drinking too much, probably to numb his feelings about all the bad shit he was doing, so he didn't have to feel guilty. I would assume the implication is there, but that. Like, him confronting Reese and having the high ground, given how Reese always talks down to him and has just got no time for him, like, him standing his ground, saying, no, I'm not just letting you whittle away like this. Like, the idea that Fusco has to be there for Reese now to drag him back into, like, active, New York machine team duty is wonderful. And obviously it's not there yet, but the fact that he even says this, step outside and, like, let's throw some punches. Obviously, in a one-on-one fight, I wouldn't expect Reese to lose to Fusco or give him a fighting chance. But he's had a lot of whiskey by this point, and Fusco's sober. So, the deck has been is evened a little bit, I suppose we'll say. But it seems like they get arrested at the end of this. So I kind of expect their subplot next episode to be largely inside the jail cell. Or at least one scene. I can at least see one scene of them both sitting in there before it goes wherever it goes. But it does seem like, we've not completed this yet. But I do love the idea that Fusco is going to really pull him back in some way. Even if he doesn't completely get him to have like a complete epiphany or like turn over a leaf. But I mean, I think it would be fulfilling if that happens. I think it would be fulfilling even if at least Reese just has to acknowledge. Like, I think the biggest moment that could come out of this for me, possibly, is the idea of Reese finally saying thank you for coming to get him. Whether that's at the end of this trip or, down the line after he's been back for ages and he maybe says it to him like an emotional moment, I never thanked you for coming to get me when I was at my lowest or something like that. Like, I could see that. The idea that the people that Reese has ended up around, even Fusco, who he's not particularly great to, he's created a bubble of people who are better and are there to support him now he's the one in need, that he's the one in trouble on an emotional, a mental level. So, yeah, I think that stuff's great. It's amazing to me that this episode started with this plot about this guy in a hospital, and I was thinking, oh, this is it, we're cooling down, this is just going to be a normal episode with maybe a cool little, a couple of character beats and stuff that are nice and fit into the grand scheme of things. But by the end, the flashbacks felt like they added a lot to Finch's character. Obviously, the main plot spiraled into being super important with the control and the idea of these other machine attempts, and that one of them might be close to functional or close enough that someone might try and finish it, and that's a big deal. And then the Fusco and Reese stuff I love as well. Even though it's not a lot of it, it's only a few scenes. Like, we're clearly sprinkling that out and giving, which is great because it's really effective on its own, but it also gives all the other characters a real time to shine and be the focus for now. Obviously, there was only one root scene. I expect she's going to be popping in a big way next episode, somehow, some way. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I suspect that we'll see that. Yeah, I'm looking at the cast list here, and the young Harold Finch is listed as Chris Burt, who I do recognize from things. I guess, yeah, he must have been the teenage version. I didn't recognize him here, though. Or maybe I don't know him. Okay, he's not the guy I thought he was. I thought he was another actor, because I saw his face on IMDb and thought, oh, that's definitely that guy from, like, other things. But I'm looking at his credits, and he's not in anything that I've seen, so I think he just looks like another guy, another actor. So never mind. My thought was completely meaningless, and I've sent us down a rabbit hole of nothing. Forgive me. Yeah, I think it's interesting how Vigilance has been treated, because this is obviously like the third time they've popped up. And it really feels like they're the small potatoes in this world right now, because even Control at the end just kind of shrugs and says, those, like, I don't know, what you call them? So Oh, she basically just dismisses them by calling them like idealist fools or something like that. So obviously they're still firing at all the good guys. They're still using terrorist tactics and things like that. So they're never going to be good. But it is kind of funny how they're just kind of the group that don't seem that threatening compared to all the other groups. Because even though we've not got HR anymore, we still have control. We still have Uncle Nolan's whole group, if I remember correctly. So there's plenty of serious threats to be dealing with in the show. But yeah, so really, I almost feel like I've shortchanged you here by only going about 25 or so minutes, because last episode I went for double that. But last episode was a special, like, extreme case of just like so much to wrap your head around. And this was still a rich episode. That's what's so great about this, is that even though this is clearly like cooled down compared to the last 3 episodes, it still felt huge by the end. It still felt like we were doing big character beats, big mythology beats. And when it comes to, like, like when I realized Fusco was the one going after Reese, and like they're the ones that are paired off for this plot where Reese is at his lowest, I just smiled and was so happy, because it was like the writers clearly knew what they were doing last episode. Everything I said about those 2 characters last episode, the writers knew about all those ideas and connections. Of course they did. And they're going straight into utilizing it and using that to give us growth in both characters here. I'm really impressed. They always seem to have their finger, or I say it as if they're doing it now, but they always seem to have their finger and understand what was working in the show and how to keep expanding and making it better and keep enriching what we already had. Because, we're learning more about the pockets of time in Finch's past that are really like throwing entirely new layers onto how he's acted in the past with other characters, with the machine. And it's not like it's like a super, like, I think by the time the show's done, if we went back and just like put out all the pieces of the backstories of like Finch and Reese in order, I don't think they would be overly complex and convoluted. I think there's just big chunks that haven't been brought up yet. And when they have been brought up, like this one, all of a sudden there's this new context for how Finch treats certain people. And it also lends to the idea that not only does he know Arthur, but part of the reason why he's able to talk to him and knows how to like calm him down is because he had to do this with his father once upon a time. He has experience here, and that's something the other characters don't know about, but we do as the audience. It just keeps making them more enriched in every possible way. So yeah. So yeah, excellent episode. Yeah, it's obviously it's not an all-timer the last couple, but it's an excellent damn episode. Season 3 is absolutely cooking right now. So thank you very much for joining. You can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and help get some bonuses and whatnot, but mostly help keep all the shows coming, all the TV reviews on this channel, all the movie podcasts over in MailFuzz Movies. Go check out those. There's bonus movie podcasts and stuff on Patreon, but mostly just, help keep this coming. If you like Persons of Interest reviews, any support is greatly appreciated. YouTube membership's also an option. So thank you very much. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?